something truly special that could revolutionize. Hello everyone, I'm here to shine a spotlight on something truly special that could revolutionize your academic journey. It's called Glintplus, and believe me, it's a lot more than the world of academia isn't easy. It's all about pioneering research, meticulous editing, and striving for nothing less than excellence amidst exactly where Glintplus comes in, to ensure that you invest your precious time where it really matters. Your research? Why, you ask? Because your success is our mission. But that's not all. Our services cover a wide range. Need to get your latest research published? Glintplus hosts top-notch journals you can count on. Worried about language barriers? Our editing and translation services will refine your work and make it accessible worldwide. Considering compiling your expertise into a book? We're here to help you publish it. And for those who thrive on collaboration, Researchment is a platform for connecting researchers across the globe, fostering innovation and discovery that only happens when brilliant minds unite. We also publish journals for some prestigious institutions and associations. Presently, our journal Mining and Geosciences, Journal of Agriculture and Applied Biotechnology, and Ondo University Journal of Agriculture and Social Sciences. At Glintplus, we take enormous pride in our manuscript review process. It isn't just comprehensive, it's crafted to ensure your work meets the most stringent standards. Yes, our versatility knows no bounds. Moreover, Glintplus is a staunch advocate of knowledge accessibility for all. So if you're aiming to make a significant impact in your field, think of Glintplus as your dedicated partner. We're more than a scholarly support service. We're a vibrant community dedicated to fostering academic excellence. Stay connected with us through our knowledge together. With Glintplus, you're not just surviving in the world of academia, you're thriving.
Thank you very much, our highly valued viewers across the world. We are very sorry for that hard-on that is not that smooth. We apologize for that. So this time and now, we want to bring in the guest speaker for today. The guest speaker for today is a young scholar with over 10 years of experience in teaching English language in the universities. Is a scholar based in America. Is currently at the University of Texas in United States of America. His name is Dr. Olarotimi Ogungbemi. May I have the honor and the privilege to break him in and call on Miss Ayomide, to read the citation of our guest speaker. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone based on wherever part of the world you are. I have the honor of introducing Dr. Olarotimi Ogungbemi to you. So Dr. Ogungbemi is a researcher and is based at the University of Texas at San Antonio. So his research interest is in the areas of environmental justice, rhetoric climate politics, climate change and environmental stewardship. He has taught courses in English language for over 10 years and is a postdoctoral fellow of the American Council of Learned Societies. He has published his research in both local and international peer-reviewed journals, and I therefore have the honor to bring Dr. Ogungbemi to start his presentation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ayomide and Dr. Koledoye too, and to our viewers wherever you are watching us from this morning from Texas. I know it's probably in the afternoon in other parts of the world. So this morning I have the privilege, to have my talk on writing for different audiences, adapting your style for experts and general readers. So we're looking at certain keywords, from our title here. The audience, it's central to what we're doing this afternoon, and we're going to see that what constitutes the audience, that in some quarters known as readers or listeners. Then we can have them in various categories. We have the expert readers, and we also have the general readers. So we're going to be looking at some of those things. And for academics generally, or researchers, uh, our end goal is to write in such a way that our writing becomes effective, and that we're able to, carry diverse audiences along as we're writing. So writing effectively for diverse audiences involves, a comprehensive understanding of their unique needs, their expectations, their backgrounds, their peculiarities. And one way to be effective is to know how to adapt our style, how to adapt our content, our language, our structure, and even our tone, depending on the kind of audience you're dealing with at a particular time. So if you want to ensure clear and effective communication, then you must know how to adapt all these things we mentioned: your style, your content, your language, your structure, and your tone. And this time around, whether your audience consists of experts or just the general readers, then today's presentation, would take us to various techniques that we can adopt when we write for these diverse groups of audience. So, but then to start, we would want to define what we mean by audience. What do we mean when we say audience? Now, the concept of audience refers to specific group of people for whom a piece of writing is intended. And understanding the audience is crucial because, like we said before now, it helps to shape the content, the language, the tone, style, and structure of the writing. And when we say audience again, it's also important that I say this early on, that one can be an expert audience in one context. It can also be a general audience, that same person in another context. Now, for someone who is in, say, engineering or agriculture, now that person is an expert audience in agriculture, for a scholar in agriculture. So if that person has the opportunity to assess or evaluate writings in agriculture, for example, or in engineering, then that person, will be treated as an expert audience. So writings coming to such a scholar or a researcher in agriculture or engineering, would at least take note of the jargons of that field, the jargons, the peculiarities of that field. But if that person, just want to read leisurely, maybe an article that is written by someone in rhetoric, someone in English, someone in the social sciences, say sociology, say anthropology, and that person in Greek or engineering in that other field is not an expert audience there. It's a general audience there. So when we say general audience or expert audience, I don't want us to think in terms of, oh, maybe someone is literate and the other person is illiterate. No. Audience, whether the expert audience or the general audience would be assumed to be a literate audience. But then, because of, our profession, our career, our interest, then sometimes we're grouped as expert audience because that is where we are. That's where we do our research. That's where we work. That's where we have our expertise. Then at that time, we just want to read. We just want to gain more knowledge about something. And when we're taken out of our field and we want to read in the other field, then we may be categorized as a general audience. Just wanted to say that. Now, still defining the concept of audience. What are some of the things that can help categorize someone either as a general audience or an expert audience? We have target demographic, and this will take care of characteristics like age, education, profession, cultural background, and interest. We also have purpose and needs. That is, when people, decide to read something, they do so, one, either they want to, gain information, or sometimes they want to entertain themselves, or sometimes they need to be persuaded about something. And that's why they want to read. So that is taking care of that purpose and needs. Then prior knowledge. Now for an expert in a field, such an expert, we have prior knowledge about that field, about certain concepts, developments, and knowledge generally in that field. And that's when we can say, okay, this person, is an expert in this field. And when we write to such a person in that field, then we write, bearing in mind that we're writing to an expert in that field. Then language and jargon, right? Every field has the jargons. There's a way you write to the audience of a particular field. And sometimes such jargons become complex, to people who are not in that field. And that's why it's also important, to bear that in mind. Then impact of audience on writing. So when we want to write, the first thing to do is to ask ourselves, who is my audience? Am I writing to an expert audience? Am I writing to a general audience? Now, as academics or intending academics, as researchers or intending researchers, if you want to write, for instance, to publish a paper in a field, you're not writing to a general audience because you want to publish a paper in a particular field. So you're not writing to a general audience. You're writing to an expert audience in that field. So you have to think about the content selection. That's after you have agreed or you have decided you're going to write on this area of a particular field, right? You have decided that there's a gap in knowledge that needs to be filled. So you think about the content selection. That is, you determine which details are necessary to include or omit based on what the audience values and understands. And since you're writing to an expert audience, then you can, preempt what that audience values, what that audience understands about that field. This is not the time to go completely elementary because you're writing to an expert audience. Then also talk about the structure and organization of such writing. If you are writing to an expert audience, then the information has to be logical and accessible for the audience. It has to be logical. It has to be accessible. Fine. You're writing to an expert audience, they understand terminologies, they understand the jargons of that field. But then you still have to, make your writing user-friendly or reader-friendly in this instance. You want to make it reader-friendly. You want to use headings. You want to use sub-headings. If those are the conventions, of the outlets where you're going to be publishing your writings or your papers. If they require you to use bullet points, they require you to use clear transitions, which I believe is a requirement in every field. You must transit clearly, from one aspect of that writing to another aspect or section of that writing. And what are some of the, words that will help you to transit seamlessly when you're writing? For example, you're familiar with your conjunctions, you're familiar with your subordinators, right? And you know that with this, you can link ideas. You can make your writing coherent. You can use cohesive devices, to link ideas, words, phrases, clauses, and sentences together. Then we also have, sometimes when you're writing, you must learn how to engage the audience or your readers. And what are some of the strategies that you can use? You can use anecdotes. You can use visual aids. You can use interactive elements. Some of these things, will help your reader to stay engaged and, to be invested in your writing and want to know more. Then we talked about, types of audience. We talked about this one, the expert audience, the general audience. But then we quickly want to, define what we mean by expert audience, general audience, and mixed audience. That's the third one we're introducing here. The expert audience, these are readers with significant knowledge and experience in the field. And writing in this field involves using specialized terminology and in-depth analysis. You use specialized terminology. Pay attention to those keywords and in-depth analysis too, because you're dealing with experts in the field. Experts who have significant knowledge and experience. Now let's go to the general readers or general audience. These are readers with limited knowledge about the subject. And when you're dealing with a general audience, then your writing requires simplification, clear explanations, and you want to be as far away as you can from jargons because you're dealing with a general audience. Now, if you pay attention to the first sentence here, like I said before now, this does not mean that these are illiterates. Now, this means that they have limited knowledge about the subject in question. It does not mean that they are not experts in other fields. They are experts in their own fields. But on what you're writing on, this audience has limited knowledge. Then we have a third group, the mixed audience. It's a diverse group with varying levels of expertise. So when you're dealing with this group of people, you balance complexity with accessibility. That is, you learn to marry, the jargons in the field with some level of flexibility because you're dealing with a mixed audience. You're not dealing with, a fully expert audience or a fully general audience. But then an audience that, takes characteristics from both groups. And sometimes you have to provide additional explanations, or you refer them to where they can learn more about what you're doing. So today, our main goal is to explore and demonstrate methods for writers to adopt their styles to effectively communicate with different audiences. And we also have it as our goal to, increase awareness of audience diversity and to try to enhance accessibility of complex information and foster better engagement through tailored communication. And we believe that majority of our viewers are academics, and that, as academics, as researchers, we need to disseminate findings to experts and non-specialists. Because sometimes when we write, right, we write for experts. Experts will be the first gatekeepers that will assess our writing. But then when we write also, we also have it at the back of our mind that our writing must also contribute to, growth and development in the material world. And when we're dealing with the material world, we're not dealing with those ones that were considered as expert audience for our writing. So how can our writing transcend, the word of the experts and influence, the world as it is? For example, how can our writing contribute to policy making? That's what I'm trying to say. So we want to extend, research reach and impact, and we also want to enhance professional development. We talked about expert and general audiences, so I don't want us to waste this slide talking about them again. But there are certain things that we must, remember when we think about expert and general audiences. One, the first characteristic is prior knowledge. So for expert audience, they have deep understanding of subject, including jargon and methodologies. And for general audience, would say that they have limited or no specific knowledge, about that subject. Therefore, we may be required to explain basic concepts for these ones. Then the expectations of these different audiences differ. For expert audience, high level of detail, rigor, and novel or new information, is required. But for the general audience, we want to make it accessible, want to make it engaging, and want to make it very easy to digest for them. And what is the context? When we say expert audience, for example, professional or academic context. When we say professional, it could be professional organizations. Let's say you work for an organization. Sometimes we don't, when we think of organizations, we don't think they write, but they do. Technical writing, goes on within organizations. So when you're dealing with a particular unit of an organization, let's say in that unit they have maybe scientists. Let me say scientists. That's also a baggy expression that could mean so many things, right? So let's isolate a particular aspect of science and say you're writing for maybe pharmacists, for example, or for mechanical engineers. You're writing for them. Now, you also want to bear in mind the jargons, the methodologies, the theories that apply to this field, and you present your work to them. But then, for context, for general audience, you can think about casual reading. You are just out of curiosity. You just pick up a book written by an English professor and you want to read, and you are in agriculture, right? You're not an expert audience in English, but you're an expert in agriculture, but a general audience in English. So here We're not expecting you, to understand the theories, the methodologies, and what have you. But we expect you to be able to read it and understand it, at the periphery, but not deeply enough. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. And then we're going to look at, some examples after this slide. Um, Language and jargon. We have simplification without loss of precision. So for expert audience, the use of technical jargon is appropriate and often necessary to convey precision and cater to the audience's advanced understanding. For example, complex structures that carry specific nuances are acceptable. And for general audience, simplify language to ensure accessibility. We've talked about this before now. Break down complex terms into everyday language without compromising accuracy. Use analogies, simple examples, and definitions to clarify terms that cannot be omitted. Now let's dwell a little bit on the information we have on this slide. Now for expert audience, we talked about uh, conveying precision and taking care of the audience's advanced understanding. And the sentence that follows says complex sentence structures. Complex sentence structures. Now, for those who are familiar with, the sentence system in English, right? We have the simple, compound, complex, and some other types, right? So, dealing with expert audience, don't be afraid to use complex sentence structures. Don't be afraid because they have the expertise, to understand even complex issues and complex sentences. But when you're dealing with general audience, you want to use analogies, you want to use simple examples, you want to use definitions, you want to go over and beyond, to explain terms to them because you're dealing with a general audience that will require some more explanations. Why you can get away with just leaving things at the complex level with the expert audience, you cannot get away with that when you're dealing with a general audience. So that's what we're saying. And again, for expert audience, you can have multiple layers of subheadings. You can make it dense. You can have interlinked presentations of arguments and evidence, methodologies, data sets, theoretical frameworks, and what have you. But for general audience, you want to use a linear structure. You want to guide them through your writing. You want to provide like an arc for them that will show them, what you're doing. And you must include only essential details that contribute to the understanding of the main points. So you must take care of their needs. They are just general readers. They read for leisure. They read out of curiosity. They are not experts in the field. And that's why you must, Then the tone and style, formal versus formal approaches versus informal approaches. For expert audience, the tone is usually formal and impersonal, and it adheres strictly, to the conventions of academic or professional discourse. And style is characterized by precision, by objectivity, and a focus on content over form. Pay attention to those things. Style is characterized by precision, by objectivity, because you're dealing with experts, and they know what you're talking about. So when you now contrast that with what is expected, especially with respect to tone and style for a general audience, the tone is usually conversational. We make it relatable, we make it engaging, and like we said before now, anecdotes, human, uh, a friendly voice, because we want your writing to be accessible to these ones. Now, quickly look at some of the examples that we have here. So the first one, you know, will be for the general readers. That's less precise. And on this other hand, where you have versus, what we have in inverted commas, uh, will be for the expert audience, right? The day was warm. The day was warm, right? Now this is a sentence. The day was warm versus the temperature was 100.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, if I ask you this rhetorical question, which one do you think, contains jargons? Which one do you think contains jargon? It's gonna be the latter and not the former, right? The day was warm. If you say that to anybody, regardless of their faith, anybody who is human enough, to feel the warmth of the day or to feel the cold of the day, will know that this is what you are saying. This does not require further explanation because it is simple enough. But when you say the temperature was 100.7 degrees Fahrenheit, this requires some level of expertise. One, this person must know what Fahrenheit refers to. This person must understand something about about degrees and the numbering system. Now look at this other one again. We saw over 50 drilled holes from where we stood at one of the entrances versus we observed 53 drilled holes from the northeast side entrance. Again, we noticed that one, is more elevated than the other. And that is the latter sentence there. That is more specific, and that shows that this person understands, for example, geography. Another one here, several pieces of concrete were sticking up from the dirt versus 3 pieces of concrete between 1 and 2 feet in length were embedded in the ground. Again, one show more professionalism than the other. We added more water versus we added 1.5 liters of water. This is definitely meant for a general audience because it is less precise. Then this is for an expert audience because it is more precise. As a result of the previous experiment versus the previous experiment demonstrated. Now I'm going to pause a little and provide some explanation on example 5 as we have it here. So as a result of the previous experiment versus the previous experiment demonstrated. Now, for those again who are familiar, you don't have to be in English, but those who are familiar with the active voice and the passive voice in English. The latter example here, the previous experiment demonstrated. This is in the active voice, right? And usually when we write our research, this is what we are encouraged to use because this is more straightforward. This shows that this person is, moving around. You're not going straight. As a result of the previous experiment, we blah 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 blah. We demonstrated blah 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 blah. But here, the writer says the previous experiment demonstrated. Now, who is doing the demonstration? It is the previous experiment and not the human subject that we're going to insert here. So when we write, we want to be deliberate about it. We want to learn to keep our writing in the active voice. When it does something, it shows who the true actor of the verb is. But by the time we use the passive voice, sometimes it allows us to hide, the subject or the actor. And in the process, the meaning can become obscure. But when we write using the active voice, then usually the meaning, becomes more prominent, more foregrounded, and our writing becomes clearer in the process. Then we have another example here. These results, taken together with the previous results, mean. Now compare that to the previous and current results collectively indicate. What do we notice here? We notice that the writer is wasting words. And for someone who is not too or well grounded, in the language, this can become problematic. As opposed to the previous and current results collectively indicate. So you have your subject, and indicate is your verb, right? And it also follows, the the active voice. We're not saying this does not follow the active voice, but in this instance, you can do with less words and achieve greater proficiency. Then example 7. There were a number of different designs considered versus after consideration of many designs. After consideration of many designs. Now, if you look at this, there were a number of different designs considered. Why can we say this is not sharp enough? I know my audience cannot talk to me directly now, but then we will say that this is not sharp enough because what is our subject here? And who considered those different designs? There were a number of different designs considered. By whom? But look at the other one. Even though after consideration of many designs, will just be a phrase. But then the real subject will be here. We will do this. So we have many more examples, other examples here, but I think the slide will be uploaded for our use later. So this is another example, but then I think the slides also will be, I don't know if I still, okay, if I still have five more minutes. Okay, I still have 5 more minutes. I can let's quickly look at this. I think this is also important for our purposes here. Let's look at this. So we have something that looks like an abstract, and we have both for an expert reader and for a general reader. So let's take the one that is for the expert reader and see some of the things we've been talking about. So the article would delve into the molecular mechanisms of mRNA vaccines, their interaction with the immune system, and detailed results from recent clinical trials. Now let's just take this first sentence and see some of the things we'll be talking about, how they manifest in just this one sentence. Now we have scientific terminology. What are some of the scientific terminology that we have here that shows that we're writing for an expert audience? We have molecular mechanisms of mRNA vaccines. That's a jargon that belongs to a particular field, right? And what is the implication of that? So that means that text, that sentence, that writing assumes a high level of prior knowledge. That is, you're writing with the mindset that your reader understands these terminologies and jargons. And what is the tone? The tone, is formal, because you know that whoever is reading this and will make meaning out of this understands what you're doing. You're not in the mood to try to bring down that elevated form of language, because you know that your reader would be experts in that field. Now, a quick one for the general readers. Now look at this one. So the post explains what vaccines are, how they prevent diseases like COVID-19, and why vaccination is important for community health. Now, it is safe to say that here, this writer tries as much as possible to avoid jargons, to avoid terminologies that would be too difficult, for the reader to understand. And that's what we're aiming at as writers, as speakers. We want to ensure we understand our audience and that we tailor our writing to their needs in such a way that that they can read. This is another example that I think you can also take a look at, that you can access on the website of this noble organization. So how do you go about understanding your audience, your target audience? If you're not sure about your audience and you want to know more about them, you want to gather demographic information, you want to gather interest and preferences so that you can tailor your content. And sometimes you also want to implement feedback forms. It could be maybe you use an interactive platform where they can provide feedback for you. Then we also want to ensure that we align, content with objectives. We want to define our purpose, and right from the outset, we want to ensure that the primary objective of our communication is clearly communicated. It is meant to inform, to persuade and entertain. And when we're writing, every part of the writing, must adhere, or serve the overall purpose, and that is the purpose that you have already defined. You want to inform, or you want to entertain, or you want to persuade. Now, what are some of these techniques? So if you want to simplify, your writing for a general audience, one, use analogies. That is, explain complex concepts by relating them to familiar situation or objects. And two, avoid passive voice. Avoid passive voice. And why is that important? If we avoid passive voice, then our sentences, will be clearer. That is, if we adopt active voice and avoid passive voice, and it will be more dynamic, it will be easier for general audiences to understand. We also want to include visual aids. I want to include graphs, I want to include charts, infographics, and images generally that can help us to illustrate our points more effectively and more clearly. And sometimes when you want to start your talk, your writing, you can use anecdotes, you can state your positionality, this you can write your personal experiences to humanize your content, to illustrate your points and humanize it. And usually when we write, let it follow the conventional narrative arc, where your content will have a clear beginning, middle, and a end, and an end to create a compelling narrative, and what have you. Again, common pitfalls, a very quick one. Sometimes in our attempt to reduce complexity, then we oversimplify our writing, and that way our writing may lose its meanings, our intention. So we don't want to oversimplify. We want to find a balance between not making our writing complex and not making it too simplified. So we want to learn to find a balance in between. Then we also want to be careful not to, even if you're writing for an expert audience, we don't want to infuse our writing with a whole lot of jargons that it become excessive and confuse your readers, even well experts. So I think we've come to the conclusion of our writing. So adapting your writing style to suit different audiences is essential for effective communication, whether you're addressing expert or general readers. And what we are trying to do here is to, explore various strategies to customize content, language, structure, and tone that meet the specific needs and expectations of each audience type. So thank you for listening to me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Ogungbemi Olarotimi, for your wonderful presentation. We want to appreciate you, and our audience in the house, we also appreciate you for your time. And I believe that we have learned a lot from his presentations. He's an expert in this area, and he has done justice to the topic. And you will also agree with me that the topic is a very wide one. So that is not how it could exhaust every aspect of the topic. And we want to assure you that whatever might be your questions, the question you have, your concerns, just ensure that you send those concerns and questions to us, and we can assure you that solutions will be provided offline as soon as you send them. Thank you so much. So the next items on the agenda, because we have it is so much into our time, we are very sorry for that. The next item is question and answer. You must have documented your questions that you want to ask. And but before then, I have a question here. The question was sent to us since yesterday, because the particular person or researcher found this topic very interesting. So I'm going to ask our guest speaker this particular one before others start coming in. So this person started um, by saying so much about the topic, and let me just read the way he put it. He said, I must confess that today's topic is very clear to me. Why? Because of my current research. I have read numerous articles from various authors from different countries, each with its own unique style. Often, I encounter articles that feel like eating very hot food, while others are like drinking cold water. What do I mean by this? The eating very hot food style refers to authors who are eager to quickly convey their message without proper explanations, while drinking cold water signifies a style where information is presented clearly and very detail is explained. I I believe most people find the latter style easier to understand. However, I find it challenging to adopt this style, especially in the initial draft of a manuscript. Now, this is not the question. How can one adopt a particular writing style, and how long does it take to fully adapt? So this question is over to you, our guest speaker, to um, educate the particular audience who have asked these questions. And I want to also tell us too, for those of us who have written down our questions, we can begin to send them. And as the questions are coming in, I will begin to ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Koledoye, and for the question from the person who asked that question. Very thought-provoking question. It is how. Um, uh, can you remind me the last part of the question? I got the other. How long does it take to adapt or to adopt? Do you still have the question?
Should I ask the question again?
Just the last part of the question, yeah. Where
The
it
last,
says how
okay.
long does it?
How can one adopt a particular writing style? And how long does it take to fully adapt?
Okay. I have it here too. Sorry. How can one adopt a particular writing style? Like we said before now, uh, as writers, you're not writing just for a particular audience. Now that would depend on what your audience is at a particular time, right? So, and I'll give an example, even for some of the famous writers that we know, right? For example, if someone like Chinua Achebe, right, who wrote novels that are very excellent, right? When he was writing novels, you know, probably writing to teach lessons, to inform, to entertain. But then he also wrote a book of essays detailing the problems with Nigeria, right? And you would agree with me that his audiences for these two different forms of writing will be different. So that's why I said it depends on what your audience is at a particular time. If that person is writing an academic paper, for example, that person is writing an academic paper, even though you are dealing with an expert audience, he or she must be aware that for your writing to even get through, it has to be accessible. It has to be accessible. Now, as someone who teaches technical writing, professional writing, one thing I tell my students is that you cannot sacrifice accessibility, you know, for professionalism. You say, oh, because I'm in this field, then my writing will not be accessible. So, as long as you want to include the jargons of that field, you must also bear in mind that in addition to what your writing does to your field, your writing also has an obligation, you know, to influence what happens in the society. So that way, you still want to pay attention to, for example, your use of active voice, regardless of the field where you're writing from. If you write in the active voice, then your writing will still becomes, even if the general audience does not understand your writing in its entirety, that audience will still be able to pick one or two things. So to me, um, adopting a particular writing style, you know, will be dependent on the audience you're writing to at a particular time. You don't want to say you are known for this kind of writing and you are predictable. That everybody knows that, oh, whenever they see a sentence, then they know that must have come from Dr. Koledoye. That is not a good characteristic of a writer. A writer must be flexible in such a way that his writing, you know, becomes attractive to a wide audience and not just a particular audience. But since you are writing an academic paper, for example, pay attention to the requirements, the conventions, you know, of your field. But then also have it at the back of your mind that you must communicate beyond your field if you want your writing to really be liberating, you must communicate beyond your field. Then how long does it take to fully adapt? Writing is a continuous process. Dr. Kolede can attest to this, and other scholars in the house. They have been writing for as long as they have been in the academia. right, Dr. Koledoye? You've been writing for as long as you have been in the academia, and you can agree with me that it does not get easier. Writing is difficult. We have to say it the way it is. Writing is difficult. Writing requires commitment. Writing requires you to keep doing it over and over and over again. So you cannot say you have gotten to that stage where you you just pick up your pen and the ideas will come. No, you have to keep doing it. You have to keep doing it. It will take for as long as you're committed to writing. So you don't fully adapt because you have to keep learning to write to get better. With each writing that you do, you get better and you get better and better and better. So I cannot put a timeline to it. It's something you continue to do as long as writing continues to interest you. That's what I would say about that.
Thank you, Dr. Rotimi. Ayomide, can you continue the questions at your side? Okay, let me ask them. This question is also coming. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, sir, we can hear you. There is a question on the screen, sir.
Yes, I can see a question here. The question is coming from one of our viewers. Say, when does your writing bore the reader? That is, what makes a write-up boring?
Yeah. When does your writing bore the reader? I would say the reader becomes bored if, for example, if you're reading something, written by academics, and you begin to see grammatical errors, regardless of the field of that person. That's the first thing that will put your reader off, right? When they begin to see grammatical errors. And that's why proofreading, editing, and what have you are very, very important. Sometimes when we write, we just write as those thoughts, comes to us. We put it down, we write. Then because of our busy schedule, sometimes we don't even go back to see what we have written. And your reader can become bored and they say, we expect more from this person. That's number one. Number two, if your writing, is not well formatted, that can also bore your reader. For example, your writing is not structured. You don't have maybe headings and subheadings, to structure your argument. That can bore your reader. If you write maybe an 8-page document, for example, and you just write everything in one huge and gigantic paragraph, then that can really bore your reader. I hope I've answered that person's question. There could be many other things, but at least those two came to mind.
Okay, thank you so much, our expert in the house, our guest speaker. I'm going to ask two more questions before we go. Our time is up, and we want to appeal to you that you quickly make the answers snappy. The first question is, what is the implication if one writes for expert audience without including the jargon on terminologies?
Yeah, the implication is that you are not there yet, that they shouldn't entertain your writing yet because they demand more from you. They are experts. They've gone beyond, that elementary stage, that general stage. So they expect that any writing that comes within that fold, should have some of these traits of being written by an expert.
Thank you so much. The last question is just it's a request, not a question. And audience is asking, can we get this material you presented? I think that is, we will handle that. So what we do, or what you're going to do, that particular viewer, you will contact us on the platform immediately after the program. So thank you so much. So the next item on our agenda is presentation of certificate. But before then, this is Researchment Academy powered by Glintplus, and we have the following services. We have some journals that we want to encourage you to submit manuscripts. And as I said earlier on in my introductory speech, that's one of the reasons why we decided to go this way, is because of the challenges we were facing at the initial stage of our services, rendering our services. And we have some journals which I'm going to let us know, and I'm sure you have seen them on the screen. And one of the challenges there was that we had high rate of rejection, and this high rate of rejection as a result of poor quality manuscripts, and that has led us to where we are today. And by the grace of God, the rate of rejection has tremendously, decreased. And we want to encourage you to submit manuscripts to the following journals. Journal of Agriculture and Applied Biotechnologies. For those of you who attended our special edition in May, and we informed you that our target is to ensure that all our journals are indexed in Scopus. And by the grace of God, JAB, which is the Journal of Agriculture and Applied Biotechnology, has met all the requirements for to be indexed in Scopus. And we also have Chemistry of the Tutu Environment codes. We also have Journal of Mining and Geoscience. And we also partner with institutions and universities. And in case you want to partner with us at an institution, we are available. Currently, we are publishing for a university, Ondo State University, formerly Ondo State University, currently Adekunle Ajayi University. And we have journal, Ondo University Journal of Agriculture and Social Sciences. And we publish that journal for Department of Agricultural Economics and Department of Agricultural Extension and Rural Development. And we are also having so many universities, institutions who are ready to partner with us. Very soon, we'll be hosting journals from other universities. And we also render services like manuscript editing. We also do typesetting. So in case you need these services, just log on into our website, and then you can request for any of these services, and we will be ready to provide for you at affordable price. And we also, a link has been going through our screen that this is a series we started in October last year, and we want to award certificates to dedicated participants, and we are taking attendance of that. Kindly click on the link pinned to our WhatsApp group where you can take your attendance. We have a number of attendance. You must participate. If you participate to a particular level, then you'll be given, you'll be awarded a certificate at the end of this series. Then in our special edition in May, we launched an app which we call Researchment App. It's a web-based app, and it serves two purposes. It is for academic and for social. It has characteristics like that of ResearchGate, and at the same time, like social platform like Facebook and WhatsApp, where you can interact with colleagues which can lead to collaborations. So please log on onto our website at Glintplus and be able to access the app. So thank you so much for listening. The next item on the agenda is the presentation of certificate to our guest speaker. Ayomide, can you come up with certificates? Ayomide, is certificate on?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, thank you so much. I can't see from this end. Sorry, I have a technical issue. On behalf of our director, Dr. Efo Issa, I want to appreciate the guest speaker, Dr. Olarotimi Ogungbemi, all the way from Texas, for your beautiful presentations. I'm sure our attendees have benefited from your wealth of experience. And we want to also, that's a kind of appeal that whenever we call upon you, I'm sure you will also answer you. There are lots of areas where we can collaborate. And on behalf of Glintplus and Researchment Academy and our director, Dr. Efo Issa, I present this certificate to you to appreciate you in our only two way. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Researchment Academy and to Dr. Kolide, as well as the entire team and our viewers today. I really appreciate this, and I feel honored. So thank you very much.
So, vote of thanks. When I invite Dr. Imise to give vote of thanks.